So just a quick one. So we've got CodeCommit, right? Just like Stash and Git repositories, and you want to clone it down to your local hard drive, right? So here we've got our AWS account. We're looking at CodeCommit, and we've got a whole bunch of different repositories. And let's say we want to go and clone our notebook repository. Then we've got our workstation here, we've got a Git directory, and I want to basically download a copy of Notebook to my local workstation. So what you can do is normally git clone, copy the address, and just paste the address, and then it'll try to download all the details for you. Now there's ways of downloading this. If you have some Git credentials, which have already been set up against your IAM role, but that's kind of a manual process on a user by user basis. So this way that I'm showing you here is actually using the authentication method when you access AWS services via the CLI, right? So if we bring up another console, you've got AWS S3 LS. So I'm just listing out all the buckets on the account, and this is hooking into the development account. And you can see that I can run commands in my command prompt, and then that goes into the AWS account. So assuming you've already got your workstation hooked up and authenticated into the given AWS account, you can just press cancel, and it should start to download. So what's happened is I've canceled that prompt, and instead of providing the username and password, it's actually gone and used the credentials file. So I'll just open this, and by the time you actually watch this, these credentials will already have been expired anyway. But you can find your credentials file in your user directory, go to .aws account or .aws, and then there's a credentials file. If you open it as a text document, you've got the key, access key, session token, and expiry date. All right. So that's the credentials files that gets used by the AWS CLI. And so what's happened is, because my profile has access to CodeCommit already, then I can access the repositories via my IAM role, which I have authenticated into the CLI, but now I'm telling Git to also pretty much piggyback on those credentials. All right, and so the way that it's done is if you actually go back to your directory, your users directory, you should find a .git config file. And if you open that up, you'll see your username that you've set, your email, plus this also section for credentials. And these few lines tell Git to basically use AWS to use a credential helper to authenticate using your credentials file to access your AWS account. All right, so how does this actually get set up? So there's a few things you're going to need. It explains the steps here on this address. So what's the title? Setup steps for HTTPS connections to AWS CodeCommit repositories on Windows with AWS CLI credential helper. All right. So first step is really, this is setting up the IAM, which for our development account, we have full access, so you shouldn't have to worry about this. But you'll need installing the AWS CLI onto your own workstation. So if I go over here, just making sure like one of these commands, the AWS CodeCommit help, making sure this kind of command works. And then here it's just telling you to run AWS configure. Now you don't actually have to run this bit, but you just have to make sure that you do authenticate into the AWS account. So you'd normally be running something like, I believe it's this command. So AWS Azure login mode GUI, and then this will attempt to authenticate your workstation into the RACQ AWS account. All right, so once that's complete, normally it will have populated a lot of these fields. Then you can proceed. It kind of assumes that you need to have Git already installed, and also you need to have Git Credential Manager also installed. So for me, I've actually installed these slightly differently on mine. So I've used a package manager, which is Winget. So Winget, and here I've got, where is it? So I've got Git installed, and there is also at the bottom, the Git Credential Manager core. So you just have to make sure you have both of these installed, a copy of Git installed and a copy of Git Credential Manager core installed. I don't know if you can actually install this separately. All right, so if you do go over and search Git Credential Manager core, the Git repository is the first one, and then if you select releases, and you should be able to find the installation files here. So this is just the kind of library or package that you need to install so that Git knows how to use the credentials file. All right, and then once that's set up, going back to here, you've got Git Credentials Manager installed. Then you just need to run these few commands. And so these commands will add a few lines to the .git configure file, I believe. So you just run them in command line, and they should add these lines to your git config file. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, it says you can run this command, and this will just show you what's currently in your git configure file. And you can see that they are there. So just exiting. And again, let's say if we want to grab this repository. Now I've just noticed that you have to, instead of pressing OK, just press cancel. And then it knows how to, I guess, reference your credentials file on your AWS account. Then if you looked over to the Git folder, you can see I've got now my notebook and my CDK boundary repository. Both have been downloaded. And you can basically make your changes to the branches or whatnot, and then push them back to your repositories on the AWS account. All right.